Okay, good afternoon, councillors, officers and members of the public. I just want to run through some housekeeping rules. Can I request that mobile phones are either set to silent, switched off for the duration of the meeting, and I'd also like to inform everyone that this meeting is being streamed on YouTube, so welcome any members of the public. First on the item is the apologies. So do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chairman, we have apologies from Councillors Trevor Conway, Joe Garner and Mark Pengelly, the Executive Director of Finance and Section 151 Officer, and the Director of Law and Governance and Monitoring Officer.
Thank you. The second item on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of August. Can I seek updates from officers where necessary?
Thank you, Chair. On page 7, it was asking for a definition of investor save. So that's where a project requires one-off upfront investment leading to ongoing future benefits, which may be in the form of cost reductions, improved service delivery or increased income.
Perfect, thank you. And then if everyone else is in favour, can I have a proposer?
Subject to the amendment made by Mr Mitchell, absolutely propose that.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Eglin. I will then sign this. And then next on the agenda is any declarations of interest from members in the room. No, thank you. So now we come to item 4 on the agenda, the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman, or LGSCO, and Housing Ombudsman Service, or HOS, Annual Report 2024-25, included the HOF self-assessment. If I can introduce Simon Mills.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. So this paper is the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman, referred to as the LGSCO, and the Housing Ombudsman Service, the HOS, are independent bodies that investigate complaints about council services, adult social care providers and social housing in England. Their role is to determine whether organisations are making decisions fairly and appropriately. The annual letters from both Ombudsman services confirm which complaints have been investigated and the outcomes of those investigations. They're attached to this report as Appendix 1 and Appendix 2. In accordance with the Housing Ombudsman Service Complaint Handling Code, the Council is also required to submit an annual self-assessment of compliance, a complaints performance and service improvement report. These documents are shared with the committee ahead of the submission deadline on 30th of September and will be published on the Council's website, and they're attached to this report as Appendix 6. So moving on to review of the complaints for the year 2024 to 2025. Section 2 of the report outlines the total number of cases investigated by the Ombudsman in relation to North Northamptonshire Council. The LGSCO is a comparison table in Section 2.2, and HOS, there's a breakdown in Section 2.4. The LGSCO upheld 19 cases, which is 2 up from the previous year, with Education and Children's Services accounting for 73% of the casework. The HOS upheld 5 cases, which was 3 up on the previous year. Looking at the details of casework handled by the authority during the same time period, the Council handled 3,180 Stage 1 complaints, of which 119, 4%, were escalated up to Stage 2. The same number was then investigated by the LGSO, and they then upheld 16% of those investigations. This was consistent with the 2023-2024 data. Detailed case reviews are available in sections 4.7 and 4.13 within this report. And please note that one case has been omitted due to confidentiality. In terms of the Housing Ombudsman complaints, we had for the services in total 374 stage ones. It's 420 if you include the service requests, of which 28, so that's 7%, were escalated to stage 2. The internal uphold rate for these complaints was 20%, which was typically resolved via an apology and corrective action. And in terms of the complaint themes for those housing services, 53% related to repairs, 29% cited delays or poor service standards, and there are other issues including poor communication, staff behaviour and dissatisfaction with policies. The Housing Ombudsman Service considers and makes findings against a variety of categories of service delivery when determining a complaint. Further analysis is provided in sections 4.11 and 4.12 within the report, along with detailed case reviews in sections 4.13. There's also service improvement actions detailed in Appendix 7 and sections 4.17 to sections 4.18. Moving on to the key issues identified. The LGSCO identified a recurring theme of timeliness of responses. Also referenced the poor handling in some instances of remedial actions. It is noted as well there are external pressures, particularly in children's and education services, which have contributed to delays. And what we're seeing in this area itself is a 75% increase in upheld complaints. And since the Council's formation in 2021, there's an increase of 144% in terms of Ombudsman approaches for the service area. That is also consistent with the surge nationally with the service area since 2015. Appendix 5 of the report also includes the LGSO's National Annual Review. They've reported for the first time that they've handled 20,000 complaints. Education and children's services, 27%, they're leading, along with housing at 17% and adult social care services at 13%. The Housing Ombudsman Service also identified a similar theme with the Council's adherence to complaint handling. In this area of service delivery, only 40% of Stage 1 complaints were responded to within 10 working days, and 18% of Stage 2 complaints responded to within 20 working days. As a result, a compliance audit conducted by the HOS in 2024 resulted in several recommendations. These are detailed in sections 5.15 to 5.17 of this report. The HOS has a national focus, and at the moment that is on leaks, damp and mould. And how that affects us locally, following a long and cold winter, issues of leaks, damp and mould have put a pressure on the service. When taken into account of the 9,000 units that we hold, 18% of the housing stock predates 1945, with a further 40% data between 1945 and 1964. Other considerations that we're going to need to take into account for the year ahead include the hazards in social housing, the prescribed requirements in England, regulations of 2025, referred to as AWAB's law, which have been laid before Parliament in June this year, with expected enforcement from October of this year to follow. This legislation will mandate strict timeframes for addressing damp, mould and emergency repairs from 2026. So taking this into account and looking at the improvements that have been made, since the introduction of the digital case management system in April 2025, housing services has shown marked improvement, with 88% of complaints handled within the required timeframes in Q1. We've also been working with officers on the new system and seen a much better adherence rate within the recent KPIs that were also published for the same quarter. And to close, in terms of the next steps, we're going to be updating the complaints policy on the website with the insertion for the housing services as outlined in this report. We're also going to be doing a final rollout on the digital case management system for MP constituency offices, and that will then follow a self-assessment against the LGSO complaint handling code and a revisit from internal audit for Q4. An additional HOS self-assessment will also be completed and reported to the Housing Improvement Board. So in conclusion, while recurring themes remain a concern, the service is committed to supporting officers and customers with casework, delivering timely resolutions, and embedding learning into practice. And for the recommendations, just refer to section 3 for the full list, and I welcome any questions from committee members.
Thank you, Simon. So I will put it out to members for any questions. Councillor Blackenbury.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm sorry to hog the mic. Just one or two small observations. First of all, I welcome the report. I think that's really useful to have a good track of how complaints are monitored and how they are dealt with. I also note in the covering letter at Appendix 1 that there are various concerns and disappointments which are highlighted by the Ombudsman, which is fine. I mean, I expect that. Where it's a complex organisation, we don't get everything right. There will always be issues that are outstanding. What interests me is that there is a move to a toolkit for response to MPs' offices, which I welcome. But I think there are also complaints that come through individual councillors, and I wonder whether that toolkit could be extended to any complaints that are either made by or, more to the point, within that individual councillor's bailiwick. It shares ownership of issues that might be going wrong in the council. It might not be going wrong. I appreciate that complaint's a complaint. It isn't necessarily upheld. But I wonder whether, in the interests of transparency, in the interests of actually trying to be the transparent and efficient organisation that we want to do, that we can have as much indication that the complaints, not necessarily the individual complaints, but that complaints are being dealt with timeously and as effectively as possible. I of course appreciate not all complaints can be resolved, not all complaints fall within the jurisdiction of the council, and that there will always be issues that are frankly disputed. But I think just spreading the love a little bit, having MPs, offices, and other stakeholders who make inquiries into complaints is great. But you know, there's how many are we now? We're about 68, isn't it? No, yes, there's 68 ward members here. And we all have ownership of every complaint that's made, whether it's in our wards or not. And I don't want to put a heck of a lot of extra work on the team, so I'm putting this out more as a suggestion, but just spreading that load and having that interaction and interest might educate councillors, but it also, I think, would assist officers in discharging their functions.
Thank you, Councillor. Would you like to respond, sir?
Thank you, for you, Chair. So, sorry, Councillor Brackenby, just to confirm, are you referring to a members' case management system with the linkages between associated cases across case types?
No, not necessarily. I think it's a bit higher level. I think we are all concerned, and I think it came up in the training, that we're all rather concerned there is a number of complaints that are, for whatever reason, either not dealt with or not satisfactorily dealt with, and it's coming back. Now, I agree with. I think I agree with what you're saying. I don't want there to be a system where everybody's getting into the weeds of every complaint, because everybody's got enough work to do, and I think on the whole everything is handled quite efficiently. But I do think that to have an overall knowledge of what's going well, what isn't going well, the areas that things are going well and not going well. And we touched in the training session a moment ago that, you know, there are some very emotive areas, education and planning, we, as it were, touched on, which will always generate a large number of complaints, and I think that's always going to be understood. But nevertheless, if there are spikes, areas where there are suddenly a much increased or indeed reduced number of complaints, I think it's something that you should be sharing with members, because, as I say, they've got ownership, and to some extent they can deflect quite a lot of the incoming flack at times. Sometimes it is useful for a ward member to be able to say, actually, no, don't complain to the council because this is the answer. You might not like it, but you know it isn't within the council's remit. So I'm just trying to sort of expand a bit of transparency. It's a bit tricky to literally write a policy in a short discussion, but basically try to spread it and try to involve as many colleagues as possible.
Thank you. Yes, that definitely helps, and I think we can definitely work with DEM services around regular updates as we do quarterly, but sharing that with the members so you can see those themes, because it will help with that linking with your own casework as well to see what's happening. So thank you.
I appreciate that.
Thank you both. Any other questions? Michael?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, just on Section 4.7, where the 18 upheld decisions, it seems to me that a lot of them are based around EHC plans, which is a concern, because one of the issues that we've had for a while is one of the focuses is safeguarding. And if you're getting delays in getting an EHCP plan, you're then getting a delay in getting DLA, PIP, all these sort of things. So there's a safeguarding and there's a reputational issue there. And I'm concerned that the letter from the Ombudsman then says there's also delays in paying out. And there should never be a delay in paying. I mean, get it in the system and pay these people out, because these are the most vulnerable people. And if we are delaying their plans for whatever reason, them getting the plans, which is difficult enough to get at the best of times, then delaying payments, it's just compounding it. So I would just like to highlight that is a massive safeguarding issue, and something will happen. And as and when something happens, unless we tighten up, the ramifications are just not, you don't even want to think about them.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Simon?
Thank you. I agree with the statement. I think it's absolutely important that we are acting with pace and on time. One of the things that came out last October was the internal remedy policy, which will aid this. It's got tracking with our with the services areas finance support. It means we can see this, and it also goes through how to make those payments far more efficiently rather than solid work in. So that was one of the main motivations of bringing that forward. So I would hope we wouldn't see a repeat of that commentary for this coming year, because you're absolutely right. It's critical that we, where fault is found, we remedy it as quickly and timely as possible.
Councillor. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Geary?
Through you, Chair, thank you. I think it's something that's very much on the agenda at the moment for that directorate.
Thank you. Any other questions? I might just ask one if I can, Simon. So, regarding the risk register itself, complaints management is on there. So it was referenced before by Michael regarding the letter from the Ombudsman. There's a specific line in there that says it's the third consecutive year they've had to focus on certain areas. So from a risk register perspective, are we putting extra focus on that particular area in the next 6 months or so that we don't end up with a fourth consecutive year?
Thank you, Chair. So there's been a protocol put in place with requests that come through, which is basically ensuring that it's escalated up in terms of awareness of those due dates. We also have predetermined the return dates in advance of that deadline, so we've still got a bit of a net, so to speak, to get it done if it goes over that time frame as well. And that was introduced in the last quarter. So that should be helping that process going forward. I think we've also had there's been a state of flux within that service area as well, which hasn't helped. And there has been some more consistent support and decisions making with those services going forward. We are seeing a smaller volume as a result of that. So hopefully heading in the right direction.
Perfect, thank you for that. Are there no other questions? Councillor McElhenney.
Sorry, I was just going to say that it's quite concerning that out of 22 complaints that reached the Ombudsman, 19 were upheld. Is there any reason that we've obviously prevaricated for some reason or other to reach that point where we lose the vast majority?
Thank you, Councillor. Simon.
Through you, Chair, thank you. You'll look at the cases that have been broken down underneath Section 4. A lot of them pertain to the fact of loss of education or not finding the placement for the child. So it goes back to that national figure around the fact that the amount of cases and that we're trying to support versus the capacity within the schools in which to put those children so they have the right access to education. That is where that limit is proving to be problematic. And so that isn't, unfortunately, something unique to us. That is a national problem, unfortunately. That's why that number is increasing. So we saw it go from 8 to 14 last year. So it's definitely a focus area.
Thank you, Councillor. Michael?
Sorry, just through you, Chair. Just to add some meat to that, part of the problem that we have is, from a school's perspective, is that there is a lack of good provisions, but good alternative provisions. So if somebody is, for example, excluded from school, or the school isn't an appropriate setting for them, there currently aren't enough provisions. So there's more homeschooling taking place, or we're paying for tutors and this kind of thing, which may not be appropriate either. So that's just a sort of a background that it is a nationwide thing. It's also the fact that we don't have enough capacity for people who need the different type of schooling.
Thank you, Michael. If there are no other questions, then I will move to... Sorry. I'll move for the Audit and Governance Committee to note that the content and recommendations of the LGSCO and HOS annual review letters, including the outcomes of their investigations, completed in the year 2024-25 that relate to North Northamptonshire Council. And number 2, notes and the content and recommendations of the annual landlord complaints and service improvement report included the updated annex for insertion in the corporate complaint handling policy. So if I can please have a proposer for this. Thank you, Councillor McElhenney, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Iglin. So with that, we will move on to the next item of the agenda, which is the internal audit progress report, which I will invite Rachel Ashley-Cornt to give us an update.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the latest update on the delivery of this year's internal audit plan. So Appendix A is in the usual format that the committee has received before, and I'll just talk you briefly through the key sections just to guide you through, and then I'll be happy to take any questions. So a copy of the internal audit plan for the year is provided in Table 1 which is from page 166 of your pack today, which lists all of the audit assignments and the status of each of those as at the time of producing this report. So I'm pleased to say since this was produced, we've finalised a number of further audit reports, so those are already ready for your next progress update. So at the time of producing this report, we had finalised a further 4 audit reports. So these are summarised as usual in the third section of the appendix, so section 3, from page 160 of your pack. So talking briefly through each of those. So the first related to the workspace transformation project. So this was undertaking what we've referred to as an embedded assurance approach. So this is the first time that we've undertaken an audit on this project, which is a key project for the council, and it was auditing the initiation stage of that project. So when we conduct these audits, we look at 9 different assurance areas, which we are based on a risk management and project management framework, and then give an assurance rating in each of those areas, which informs our overall assurance opinion for the audit. So based on the audit findings on this review, we have given a good level of assurance for both the control environment and the compliance at this point in the project. We have been able to confirm that much of the project documentation we expected to see was there and regularly in use. Risks were being identified and suitably logged, and a project manager had recently been appointed, which would further support that going forward and ensure that we have an updated delivery plan. We just made a couple of recommendations around ensuring we have a clear log of any decisions which have been made in all of the different levels within the project governance, and also ensuring that we have clear benefits set out from the outset to inform a benefits realisation exercise when we get to the conclusion of the project. So we will continue to engage with this project through its life cycle, and I'll bring back further updates to you at future meetings. So the second audit related to health and safety in waste services. So this was looking at how we manage the risks around health and safety, both within what was our outsourced contracted services and also our in-house service. So overall, we were satisfied with the framework in place in terms of the controls. Generally, risk assessments had been conducted, and there was evidence of a number of the controls we expected built into contracts. We did identify, however, some gaps around the risk assessments where risks had been identified. We couldn't consistently see the actions that had been recorded in response to each of those to manage them effectively. And we also had some gaps around training records, which meant that we weren't able to assure, as part of the report, that all of the officers involved had the relevant training. Whilst we could see a training programme was in place, the records didn't facilitate that assurance. So on that basis, we have given a moderate assurance opinion for the control environment and the compliance on this review, and a medium organisational impact, primarily due to the health and safety risks associated with this area. The next related to private sector housing and empty homes. So this related to some of the council's statutory duties in terms of ensuring the quality and standard of housing within the area, and also includes enforcement activity that the council must undertake in this area as well. So we were looking at our compliance both with our own policies and strategies, but also our compliance with our statutory duties, and testing a sample of different types of cases that this service deals with to give some assurance over how that's operating in practice. So initially, we did identify some gaps in terms of the policy and strategy framework, in that the strategy for empty homes currently remains at draft. So that needs to be taken forward to address that gap. And we also had some documents that were out of date at the policy and procedure level, just to make sure they were fully up to date with the latest legislation and working practices. So just need some strengthening in that area. Based on the sample testing that we performed that looked at a range of different areas, including housing condition complaints, licensing inspections and enforcement, and housing in multiple occupation licenses, we were satisfied that generally the processes were operating as they should be. However, there were inconsistencies in the record keeping, which did mean that we weren't able to give the highest level of assurance in some of these areas. What we have been assured about is that a new case management system is being introduced at the time of the audit, and that should address a number of the issues that we identified around those gaps. So that's positive in terms of the direction of travel. We also highlighted that the council needs to maintain up to date with some of the significant reforms we're expecting in this area, and it's an area I would expect us to revisit as part of future audit plan coverage, and obviously we'll mention that in our audit plan development later in the year. So overall, we gave a moderate assurance for the control environment and the compliance with a low organisational impact. And the last related to public sector decarbonisation funding. So this is a pot of money that the council has received of over 3.8 million to support the decarbonisation of corporate properties. So as part of this review, we want to get assurance over compliance with the funding terms for that money, also our own council's contract procedural compliance and associated risks around the delivery of this work as well. So we were satisfied that the funding requirements were being satisfied in relation to that money. We also selected a sample of spend of over £3 million, and we were able to evidence that in each case that was eligible and in terms of the terms of the usage for that money. And we were also satisfied that the contract procedure rules internally was being suitably applied in practice. And we could also see evidence of monthly reports being produced in line with deadlines as required by the funding body as well. So whilst we recognise that the council has identified some potential risks in terms of the ongoing delivery around the costs and potential timeliness of delivery, we were able to give a good level of assurance at this point in terms of the control environment and the compliance with a low organisational impact of those findings. So the rest of the report provides an update on the implementation of actions arising from audit. So table 2 on page 176 provides an update on activity in terms of implementation of those actions. So since the August progress report, 16 actions have been marked as implemented. We currently have 66 actions which remain overdue, which has dropped from August when we had 71 overdue, so it is going in the right direction, but we obviously need to continue to maintain the momentum in this area with officers prioritising the completion of these actions. We did at the time of reporting still have 3 actions which were high priority and over 3 months overdue, so these were provided for you in table 3 on page 177 of the papers. I can provide the committee with a positive update on this in that the third action in that table on page 177, based on evidence provided at the end of last week, has now been marked as implemented, so that has brought that down now to 2, and that will be included in the stats for your next progress report as well. So finally, Chair, just to mention as well that within the report is the outcome of the latest real-time risk assurance work. So just to reiterate to the committee that this is not an audit. This is to support the committee in your work around the strategic risk register. So for each of the actions, we look at each of the risk register entries and take each in turn and just confirm whether the controls that are listed on the risk register are actually there and they're operating as they are stated on the risk register. So we're not giving an opinion on whether they're the right controls or whether they are operating effectively in terms of managing the risk, but we're just confirming whether they actually exist in terms of what's stated on the risk register or whether there are any inaccuracies. So the latest update on that is in table 4, where we have looked at risk entry 16 from the strategic risk register, which related to the health and safety related risk. I wasn't going to draw anything out to the committee's attention in relation to this. There was no significant findings, just a couple of recommendations for clarification within the content of the risk entry, but I'm happy to take any questions away on that. And finally, on our customer satisfaction on page 186, you'll see we now have some additional categories within our customer feedback forms to try and align more with the Council's internal audit strategy and also the internal audit standards. And we've had included in there the first update in 25-26 in terms of the responses we've received. So I'm happy to take questions, Chair, on any of the detail within the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Do I have any questions? Michael?
Thank you, Rachel. Just for my education, can you just explain to me the ramifications of the empty homes? If we don't have a policy, are we at risk of missing out on some income if we've got too many empty homes? And how is that monitored? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. So this is something that the private sector housing service needs to consider in terms of prioritising their activity. So it's not currently a statutory requirement to have an empty home strategy, as far as I'm aware. So that's not an issue from that perspective, but it is something that if the council wants to prioritise work in this area, it's something that we need to focus and ensure we have a strategy and then put that into practice as well. So I don't see it have any implications in terms of funding, in terms of gaining any additional funding, for example, but it's something that if we, as I say, it's a priority, we need to have the strategy as to how we want to achieve that.
Thank you. So I'm just trying to get it clear in my head. So if we have an empty home, does that mean that we are, as a council, losing out on income for that home, or does it make no difference if it's empty or not?
So through you, Chair. So just to confirm, so this is private sector housing. So this is completely separate to our own housing stock. So if we were to have an empty house within our housing stock, yes, we would be losing money. And that's why we look at quick turnarounds in terms of housing voids. In this case, we're looking at empty homes within the community. So these have no income implications for the council, but as an area, we may want to ensure we're making best use of the housing in the district, if that makes sense.
Thank you both. Any other questions? Councillor Brackenbury.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Rachel, and thank you for a very clear report. And also, I'm grateful for everything your team's doing, because I know you are drilling into the various aspects that you're getting involved in. So, thank you for that. 3.9, health and safety in waste services. A little bit concerning that there are issues regarding working procedures, training, and the use of protection equipment. And I just would like to make the point that that could have insurance implications on the council if it's seen that whatever you are meant to do is not exactly being done. So I think it's really quite important in this area, and perhaps in other areas that we're not discussing today, that whatever the necessary procedures are to follow, that they are in fact being followed. Appreciate it's something you clearly have your eye on, but just I'm perhaps talking to a wider audience, it's important. In terms of empty homes, and I take the point about voids, about your voids within the council's own housing stock. But of course, as you know, HMOs are quite a controversial thing that are coming, increasingly coming into planning. So making sure that the HMOs that we have, and while I appreciate that they are privately operated, just to make sure that the standards required to successfully operate a licensed HMO are being followed and any breaches are being enforced is really important, because they are controversial. They are, however, a perfectly valid part of a housing mix. But I'm just concerned that if the council were to get a reputation for not managing or not superintending the management of HMOs in our area, it could have a detrimental effect. But thank you otherwise, that's great.
Thank you, Councillor. Rachel, any response to that?
Sorry. No, I think, we completely agree with the comments. So if this was an area that the committee would like reassurance actions were taken forward, for example, if it is an area that you think is key, that's something that's to bear in mind in terms of the audit plan for 26-27 as well. So I just mentioned that, and I'll make a note myself to revisit that as well as part of that assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Any other questions? Councillor Geary.
Yeah, thank you. Referring to waste services, I noticed there that we've got a number of moderate ratings. I also see amongst the 59 risk assessments that we make, 12 of those, I quote here, have been given an amber rating, and they may be at an unacceptable level. That's a little bit of a red flag. I wonder if you've thought about investigating that in any other way or further in future. Through you, Chair. So, as you say, that's one of the key findings that we did identify as part of the audit. So, in those cases, we would have expected something to be recorded around how they would be bringing that risk down, so what actions would be taken. So, there is an action within the action plan that we've agreed with the service area as part of this audit as to how they will manage that risk and ensure that the risk assessments are fulfilling the role they should and that we are bringing those risks down as much as we can. So, that will be taken forward by the service area. So, I'll be happy to report back to this committee specifically on that if you wanted assurance on that action. But obviously, if it wasn't implemented as expected, it would become on your radar as an overdue action in the future. And one further question, if I may, on table 3, you've got three areas of interest there. The third one you mentioned there's been some progress on. The first one with regards to the intelligent client function,
I'd like to know what an intelligent client function is, of course, but that seems to be taking quite some time, and it looks like a complex area of involvement. In fact, it says here that we were looking, originally back in 2022. Could you very briefly explain the nature of the problem there so that we can understand the reasoning behind the delay?
Through you, Chair. So in terms of the intelligent client function, so this was the function that initially was hosted by Northamptonshire Council, which is essentially monitoring the performance and the interaction with the Children's Trust. So it was about being, I suppose, an intelligent client as a local authorities as to how we're receiving that service. So at the time of this audit, which was actually in 2021-22, we wanted to ensure that that intelligent client function was working as it should, so it was reaching the intended objectives, and it was being as robust as it should be in terms of that challenge. So the recommendation at that point was to review how we get assurance over the effectiveness of that framework. Things have moved on quite significantly since then, and as is noted in the status updates, there have been conversations around where the ICF sits, who does that, and what is the role and the function of that intelligent client function. Those remain ongoing. We've obviously now have another Director of Children's Services who's started, who may have another view on it and is obviously involved in that process. So at the latest, we have been advised that there will be a review in Q3 of this year to look at how this is going to work going forward. So at that point, I'd like to think we'll then know that that arrangement is going to be suitably effective, and that will start to manage the risk that we identified at the outset of the audit.
Because coming from those questions is what kind of risk are we placing ourselves at by not having that piece of work completed, financial, legal, social? Do we have a feel for that? Do we have an understanding of what the delay is costing us?
I don't know that that's something that could be quantified as such. I think it's more that we just need to make sure that we are managing the service smartly. We are doing that as effectively as we can, given the priority of the service and the nature of the services and the financial implications as well. Obviously, there is a lot that goes on outside of the intelligent client function as well. There's a lot of conversations and a lot of meetings from a finance perspective that are outside of this. So that's not entirely reliant on that. So I think that's important to note. But if that is to be one of the mechanisms by which we monitor the performance, we just need to know that it is robust and it's meeting the objectives that it was set out to do, to complement all of those other ways in which we manage that relationship.
Thank you both. Are there any further questions? No? Well, thank you, Rachel. With that, I would like the Audit and Governance Committee to note that the internal audit progress report attached as Appendix 1 to the report and considered the main issues arising. I'd like to seek a proposer, please. Then, thank you, Councillor Brackenbury. And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Sims. And with that, if there are no other points of order, other than for myself to thank Councillor McElhenney for stepping in at the last meeting, we can close this meeting. Thank you all.